one thing maybe I want to explore a little bit further when it comes to the co-ops. So I'm in Portland, Oregon right now. You know, it's definitely the culture that would be interpreting DAOs in the way of the original definitions I read, let's say. But co-ops, especially food co-ops, are kind of big here. I think I get most of my food without even trying. Like I get like local meat and stuff from like a pretty good food co-op.
Yeah.
And you know, I think I've seen less success with co-ops in Chicago, where I'm originally from. But one of my good friends, Brian Van Slyke, he actually had a TEDx talk back when it was still a thing about Coopoly, this board game he made that promotes kind of how people can think about businesses and surviving differently and things like that. The reason I bring all this up is I think to Strongman, the case of co-ops, it would be that like almost making the argument like real communism hasn't been tried yet, in the sense that like if the appropriate tools can enable the fluid implementation of co-op values with transparency and trustlessness, right? The kind of fundamental values of blockchain, you think a lot of DAO mechanisms,
Yeah.
they would have a higher survivability rate. They can scale more easily. It's easy to educate people into onboard people or into offboard people of co-ops. And so it actually, you know, it really increases the opportunity for co-ops as an experiment, even to be run properly, right? I think I see people making that argument.
Okay, so let's just go into this, because I mean, this is an interesting question. You might convince me I'm wrong about this. In what way could they scale more easily? In what way would it be easier to educate people if a co-op was run on a DAO?
So I think that argument in my mind is coming into play at a couple different levels. One is just how things are run. And maybe this is coming from like a Web3 space, people that are comfortable understanding like the notion of like protocols, right? So the ability to like, all right, this is how things will be ran. It's transparent, it's clear. You don't have cases where like someone's maybe being shady with money, or you know, you can obfuscate, let's say, common issues that co-ops might run into, right? I'm being a little generic here because I'm not an expert on the issues that co-ops run into or why they fail. But I'm assuming that there are reasons that they fail that have to do with those kind of general blockers that are theoretically solved by Web3.
Reason they
Human
fail
issue.
is, yeah, so this is actually something to talk about, because this brings me to the core point of a governing structure, right? And this is actually really exciting for me, because once you realize this, then you sort of unlock the knowledge you need to change the future and to take over the future. The reason why co-ops fail is because they need to compete in an ecosystem with companies that have more efficient governing structures. So by that, what I mean is, if I have a co-op run grocery store and I have a corporate run grocery store, these are two different models. The corporate ones just make better financial decisions because they are not pointlessly considering the well-being of their staff, which they don't really need to consider to economically, you know, make more money, which then they can use to open more locations, which then they can use to spread. In an environment like Portland, Oregon, co-ops are going to outcompete the corporate model for ideological reasons. In the same way that, like, I may start a DAO to get some of that sweet, sweet crypto money, even if it's not the most efficient way to run things. In Oregon, many people are going to choose to shop at a co-op over a corporate-run store simply because they like the ideology that the co-op represents. So that's why it would compete so well in an environment. But in Chicago, people aren't going to be like, the fuck a co-op. I want to go where my food's cheaper. Like that's where I'm shopping. I'm shopping where the food's cheapest and freshest, and those aren't things that the co-op is optimizing for in the same way that. Or they are optimizing for it, because they do need to compete economically. Now, this is where things get really exciting. So once you realize that the systems that outcompete other systems are the systems that come to dominate in our society, and obviously, you know, where things aren't a free market, you know, they don't. Like, you could create a system where like co-ops have like tax benefits or something like that, and in that system, then co-ops would have a competitive edge and could potentially outcompete, even though they are being less efficient. But the world generally will default to the most efficient systems outcompeting the less efficient systems, with some caveats around like giant size companies like Google or something like that, and natural monopolies. But we can get into that. This is like an economic phenomenon where in some industries, just like monopolies form, and it's really hard to prevent them from forming. But anyway, so if you create a governing structure that's operating on a DAO, but you actually optimize for efficiency of the system, then the system will come to dominate more and more of the global economic landscape, to the point where it can make decisions on behalf of the global population that are in that population's best interest. I mean, even a co-op could become this. If you created a co-op that was so efficient that it outcompeted all the other capitalist systems within our society, more people were choosing to use it because it had better prices and better user experience and everything like that, then eventually this one co-op could take over the US government. This has happened before, where sub-governing institutions end up taking over the umbrella governing institution. A great example of this is the Roman Empire. You had the Christian Church, which was a sub-governing institution, grow to the extent which it then also essentially became the governing institution of the entire empire. And so you can do this.